going on, everybody? You're tuned into the 48 Laws podcast. It's your boy, Rudy Mulwamba.
And I'm John Carp.
And we're going to get into this book, everybody. This episode, we're going to do laws number 5 and law number 6. So I'm going to kick it off with law number 5. So much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. The judgment is, reputation is the cornerstone of power. Through reputation alone, you can intimidate and win. Once it slips, however, you are vulnerable and will be attacked on all sides. Make your reputation unassailable. Always be alert to potential attacks and thwart them before they happen. Meanwhile, learn to destroy your enemies by opening holes in their own reputations. Then stand aside and let public opinion hang them.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
And Greene gave 2 observances of this law. I'm just going to retell one so we can kind of move this along.
Okay.
The one that I liked particularly was the one about Choco Liang, who was a Chinese general during what was it, the Three Kingdoms period. That's right. Anyway, now Choco Liang had developed quite a reputation for being very sneaky and deceptive. In fact, they called him the Sleeping Dragon for that reason. And in one instance, he decided to take a rest, and he had his soldiers camp in a different location while he and some other, a very few, legion of soldiers went with him to this palace so he could rest up. Well, it just so happens that one of his biggest rivals, Sima Yi, just so happened to be coming around this palace, and he had something like 150,000 troops with him at his disposal. And Choco Liang saw this, and he immediately told his the few soldiers that are with him to hide somewhere in the palace and just open up the gates. And he gets out there dressed in Taoist robes and starts chanting these prayers and playing a lute. And
the last thing you'd want to do,
like what are you doing, man? and Sima Yi clearly saw that it was Choco Liang up there in these Taoist robes, and it was like, what is this guy doing? And his Sima Yi's soldiers were like, well, let's go get him, right?
Yeah.
And but because Choco Liang had such a reputation for deception and like doing, just pulling one over on his enemies, Sima Yi was like, "No way, dude, he's up to something. Let's get out of here."
Yeah.
They hightailed it out of there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that example is a great one to set up this law. It's so much depends on your reputation. Guard it with your life. It's that important that you have to guard it with your life, the same way you guard other things with your life. And I think that example, the reason why those people retreated was because of nothing that Choco Liang did, but because of how he was perceived, his reputation. So reputation did all the work. All he had to do was stand there and be brave enough to keep up a front long enough for the people to be like, oh, no, he's up to something. So let's kind of, fall back and maybe get him next time. So I think it sets it up. I think it sets it up pretty well. And I kind of feel like, again, it's all about the reason I actually do really agree with this law is because I feel like by setting up a reputation, doing something, you're essentially hiring a hype man. You know what I mean? There's always somebody. There's like an imaginary person there that always supports you whenever people are like in doubt or something. Like, if you always show up early to work and then one day you don't show up on time or whatever, people will be like, oh no, he always shows up on time. So there's always some force around you that's always covering up for you and kind of saving your hide or whatever. So I thought that was definitely good. Another part of this chapter that he spent a lot of time talking about was how to, if you don't have a reputation, how to kind of, knock other people's reputations down in order to build yours up, or to kind of deal with things in case your reputation is tattered already. How you can kind of make repairs for that. So I think it's kind of interesting that he spent so much time talking about it. I'm kind of at the school where I'd rather not tear other people's buildings so that mine's the biggest.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with you there. I think because
that's wise.
That can turn around and bite you in the butt.
Yeah,
and then pretty soon you've got a bad reputation, and
exactly.
your whole plan just went out the window.
Exactly. But there are people, there are kind of more modern people. But I mean, again, but what he lays out makes sense. So what he's saying is, if your reputation isn't great, you want to knock somebody else's reputation down. All you have to do is just cast doubt about whatever it is that they're doing. And doubt is a powerful weapon, like you were saying. So with doubt, all you have to say is, let's say there's somebody at work that you don't really like, and so you go in and you just say, oh, I don't know what he does when he's at work here. Maybe he's sleeping. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, maybe he doesn't take his job seriously. Now that doubt is out there, and people could be like, maybe it's true. And then if the person defends themselves, then people will be like, he's defending himself a little too hard here. Maybe there's some truth in what the other person was saying. And if they don't say anything, then there's always going to be those questions, like, why isn't he saying something about this? It's always going to keep coming back. But it's always kind of good. I was thinking about modern examples of kind of people with solid reputations and things like that. I think this is just a law that works all across the board. You don't want to. You want to build yourself up in a way where people just know, like, this person has character, and this person does this a certain way, does that a certain way. I think it's important all across the board.
Yeah, I think he didn't list any transgressions in the book, but I know one from my own personal life, and that's whenever I'm out playing music or even putting on a show. There was one instance in particular that sticks out in my mind. There was one time I was doing a show up in Sanford. There's a company I work with occasionally called OrlandoBands.com. Every first Saturday of the month, they put on a show at the West End Trading Company called Second Saturdays. Mm-hmm. Shameless plug.
Get that place up.
Hey. It ties into Law 6. Anyways, we'll find out.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they every Second Saturdays is an event that occurs every first Saturday of the month, as I said. Yeah. And it's basically just a lineup of a bunch of musicians, and it's like 20-minute set or something like that for each musician. Anyway, so I'm coming from Stewart, which is a 2.5, almost 3-hour drive to Sanford, and I get there, and the guy who's supposed to be opening up this event, it's like 10 minutes before he's got to go on. So Ben, the guy that puts these events on, he calls the guy. I'm not going to say this guy's name because I'm not that kind of guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, he calls him.
You're no Rudy Mulwamba.
No. But he calls this guy and he goes, where are you, dude? You're on in like 10 minutes and we haven't seen you. And the guy's, he's like, yeah, dude, you're supposed to be starting off Second Saturdays.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, I forgot, man. I'm sorry. And the guy's, you could tell this guy was stoned.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh my gosh, this guy. And Ben was like, hangs up the phone. He's like, all right, I'm not booking that guy ever again.
100%.
That's it.
100%.
If you, it's one thing if you get in a car accident or something like that, hey, you can't make it. It happens. But if you just blatantly blow something off like that, forget it, man. But unfortunately, that sort of thing happens a lot, not just in music, but in a lot of things.
Everything, in all fields.
But think about it this way, like he, that particular guy, he, definitely did not follow that law. But on the flip side, I did, because like not only did I show up there, I came 2.5, almost 3 hours from a different town, and I was still there.
100%.
You know what I mean?
100%. I think the one thing I have about this law, because again, I think it aligns with principles. You know what I mean? I think it takes discipline to do something consistently and kind of create a pattern. Again, we're talking about good things here. That's why he says guard it with your life, because a bad reputation is the antithesis of good one. Like it's going to lead. It's going to instead of having that imaginary force that always roots for you, it's going to be an imaginary force that always says no. That's not. That I guess brings you down. But what would you say to people who go like, let's not be yourself and don't worry about what other people think? Because this is essentially what your reputation is. Your reputation is other people's. You're standing in front of other people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're standing to other people.
Right.
So to someone who would say something like, don't worry about what other people think, just do you and do you, the best you can. I
think, that's I think that's really good advice, but with the condition that being yourself means that you're a decent human being.
You're a decent human being.
If being yourself means that you're a jerk, I'd say, hey, listen, man, you got to
a little less of you. You gotta be some, be Gandhi a little bit.
Yeah, you got to fix this and that about your personality because it sucks.
How about this then? Not necessarily be yourself, but don't worry about what other people think. So I've heard people say, I don't care what people think of me, and I don't do. At first, I don't buy that fully because I feel like we all have something in us that cares what other people think to some level.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw myself out here real quick. I'd say I'm the type of person that doesn't particularly care what others think of me. Mm-hmm. But when I say that, I don't mean it to mean that I'll run over my neighbor's cat and be like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, I mean, I'm not going to do that because obviously that's the wrong thing to do, right? Yeah. What I think what most people when they say that, what they mean is like they're not going to let people's opinions about them get in the way, get them down or get in the way of them doing what they want to do or enjoying their life. And I think that's healthy. Absolutely. I think the complete opposite of that, of being like someone who is properly antisocial. That term, by the way, is used inappropriately all the time. Someone who's truly antisocial is somebody who would run over somebody's cat, just because they thought it was fun, and not care about, that person's feelings and what that person might feel about them.
Is that really what antisocial means?
Yeah, if you look it up.
Interesting.
Yeah, everyone just thinks it's like, oh, I just like to Netflix and chill. It's not.
Because you would think like social, it's your relationship with others.
No, it's your relationship with society.
With society, social.
Social,
there you go. Boom. Yeah. That makes sense.
So, vocabulary lesson for
the more you know. I think that's dope, man. No, I think you're right. I think that makes sense. It's more about other people's judgments,
right?
Yeah. I mean, there's. I mean, as far as this law, I think it holds. I think it's based on principles. I think it's good to think this way because when you repeatedly do something the right way over and over again, it always yields good results, and the opposite is true. If you do bad things over and over again, it yields negative results. So again, I'm fully with, guard your reputation with your life, be aware of what it is, and try to fix it whenever, there's some damage done to it. I guess we could wrap this up and then get to Law 6, but before we do, I just think another good application of this law number 5, by your reputation and guarding it with your life, is another example that Robert Greene used. Actually, was an example of someone doing something neutral and then their reputation dictating how other people react to it. Right? He had an example about I don't fully understand. I don't fully remember exactly who was and everything like that, but I know it was of a guy and a king, and the guy was a loyal subject of the king, and the king was like, I'll let this person do whatever he wants, but there were strict rules. One of the rules was you can't use the king's carriage or his whatever. And the guy that the king liked, there was an emergency going on, so he had to use it. So he took that. I think he brought it to the hospital or something like that. And the king saw that, and he was like, "Wow, this friend of mine, he's a loyal subject, and he's courageous. When the emergency comes, he'll do it whichever way he can and stuff." And so everything was good, even though he broke the law. But then later on, when people conspired to bring his reputation down, that same king got mad about the same incident because now he saw it through different lenses. So it's a thing where, it kind of just points to how important your reputation is, because people can actually look at something semi-neutral. I say neutral, but they could just look at an event and color it based on how your reputation is. And the example that I was kind of thinking of is, and I don't know if this will hold all the way, but if someone like Kanye West or someone who's not as I don't know, like he does have the greatest reputation in the world, does something like if Kanye West goes out and buys like a like a a 2-ton statue, a solid gold 2-ton statue of like a dinosaur or something, people will be like, oh, this guy, what is he doing? They'd like get upset. Some people would. They'd be like, what's he doing with his money? He's stupid. It's people like this who blah, 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 whatever. But then someone who's more kind of upstanding, who people kind of like
if Jim Carrey did it.
If Jim Carrey, you know what I mean? Or like a Barack Obama or like Oprah or something like that.
Yeah.
Did like the same thing. People will be like, oh, look at them. They're just, being silly.
Aren't they silly?
They have the money to do it, so why don't they just do it? Or like if Kim Kardashian did something like that, people will hate her for that.
Yeah.
Just because of the reputation she's kind of built up. But again, other people would, if someone else did it, they'd Well,
there's some people that thrive off being disliked.
Yeah.
Like, it's like they go out of their way to be disliked.
See, and this is another interesting thing, because I think we need to have another segment, because we're going to talk about law number 6. But I think it's going to be important also to look at the connection between this law that we just talked about, law 5, and law number 6.
Yeah, we're gonna come upon that, but let's what do you say we do the reversal?
Let's do the reversal. Law? Yeah, let's do the reversal of this law. So, essentially, Robert Greene says there is no reversal to this. This is, which again makes sense to me, because I think this law is just based on solid, principle. He says there's no reversal. He says sometimes, in some cases, when you're more aloof, like an Oscar Wilde, where on the surface it doesn't seem like you really care what other people think of you, or you don't put that much importance on people's judgments of your actions. Sometimes it can kind of work to your positive, but over time that doesn't help, because he ties it into you either have to put forth an image of yourself, or someone else is going to do that for you. So if you don't do things right, you don't put forth an image of doing something the right way, or have a quality about yourself that you want people to see, and you don't do the right actions and stuff, someone's gonna maybe come up and make a lie about you, and then your reputation is gonna be something else. So it's more about just mastering your fate and just being in control of what other people think about you. So you say there's no real reversal. Just be aware that if you don't, if you're not upfront about having a perception of yourself out there, then someone else is going to create one for you. That's essentially what it is.
Yeah, I agree, and I totally agree with that. I would say this is definitely a solid law.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's switch gears to law number 6. And John, my phone just died, so let me borrow your book.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
And I'll take this part out.
That's cool. That's no.
It died at the right time, dude.
No,
nothing.
The people need to know that you're incompetent.
Law number 6, court attention at all cost. Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd then, or buried in oblivion. Stand out. Be conspicuous at all costs. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and the timid masses.
All right.
Court attention at all costs. Now, there's 2 parts of this law that Robert Greene talked about. The first one, he talked about courting attention, where you surround your name with sensational, and the scandalous.
He gives a lot of examples of this guy called P.T. Barnum.
Barnum and Bailey's.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah. He basically became, I guess you could say, he was kind of like the curator of the American Museum in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of stories that he goes, and I could, spend like an hour just talking about the various stunts of P.T. Barnum. But the one that really stuck out to me in relation to this particular law was in reference to the Fiji mermaid.
Yeah.
So I have to, preface the story by saying that there was a time in America where the vast majority of people either didn't know what a mermaid was or didn't care what a mermaid was. Yeah. Like, it just wasn't part of our folklore and, a cultural conscience, right? Yeah. So anyway, now that we've set the stage, P.T. Barnum came across this monkey and fish that were sewn together by some Japanese fellow, right?
Wait, so the Japanese guy sewed them together?
Yeah, and was passing it off as
That's antisocial.
It's freaking weird, man. It's like serial killer behavior.
Yeah, dude.
But anyway, so this Japanese guy was passing it off as a mermaid, right? And, he got pretty far with that hoax for a while, but then, it kind of ran dry.
Yeah.
And P.T. Barnum bought this, supposed mermaid from him. And, but before he unveiled it at the museum, he went on a big press junket talking about, supposedly they found mermaids and, oh, isn't this silly? And, had woodcuts of mermaids published in the paper so that people had an idea of what a mermaid looked like. And he just kept talking about like, oh, they supposedly found mermaids. Not really, though. Isn't that silly?
Yeah.
And then he did that for, about a month. And then eventually he goes, wait a minute. No, they're not lying. They really did find a mermaid. It's this tiny little Fiji thing, but it's a mermaid. And people were like, what?
Yeah.
And they rushed to the museum to see this monkey / fish thing that was sewn together. And some people looked at it and were like, really, dude, this is a monkey and a fish sewn together. But other people were like, holy crap, it's a mermaid.
Yeah.
Because they had seen the pictures before. They're like, yeah, that's a mermaid. Look at that. And so, and whether people thought it was a joke or they thought it was serious, it really didn't matter because people bought tickets to go see it.
Yeah.
And that was his goal, to make money off of tickets.
And I feel like that's essentially what Robert Greene was trying to say in this chapter. So the way I took it is essentially, and which essentially all he's saying is be seen. Like if power is your thing, and if you want to achieve that, and that's your end, then the first thing you have to do is you have to separate yourself from the masses. You have to separate yourself from the people. So the best way to do that is just to do anything, whether it's good or bad. Just do something to separate yourself. And then once you're separated, then you can kind of reel it back in or whatever. But I think the thing for me is, even in that example, P.T. Barnum, he did a lot of kind of curious things. I think there are a few examples. I mean, there was the one where, his boss told everyone in the town that he was like, one of the preachers in the town who had committed murder or something like that.
Yeah. So
everyone got mad at him and they chased him down. And he said, "Oh, I'll explain at the circus." And then they all went to the circus. He was like, "Oh, that's, I'm someone else."
Yeah.
He had the guy. There was a homeless man who wanted a job and no, who wanted money, and he gave him a job. He just said, "Carry these bricks around and walk around in a circle or in a large circle, and then every now and then put a brick down, walk around and pick it up, and then go again." Just do all these weird things, and people started watching it, and they were like, "What's going on here?" And that drew people in because he after he would do all that, he would walk to the circus, and people would go there to see him. So he did a lot of things like that. Some of them kind of drew positive attention. Some of it didn't, and I think Robert Greene even talked about later on. P.T. Barnum would invite that kind of different types of accusations from other people and stuff like that. He never cared what the accusation was. I think for me, with this life, I think it's true. I mean, I think it's important to be seen. I think it's important to be unique. If power is your thing, and I say if power is your thing, but I mean, I think Greene's made it kind of clear that subconsciously we all kind of want that. I mean, that's something that we all kind of strive for. But in general, I think all he's saying here is just do whatever you can to separate yourself from the masses. Now, I kind of disagree with the whole, bad press is good press thing,
Yeah.
Especially with the kind of times we're living in nowadays.
Yeah. I think we were really wanting to get to this point, I guess. And it's and the question that Rudy and I were talking about before we recorded today was, how has Trump utilized not just this law, but even Law 5? And what I mean by that is, Trump very intentionally courts attention at all costs. And in his case, he seems,
1,000,000%.
He seems to do it through saying controversial things or outright offensive things. And
all Mexicans are rapists. That's what I said. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, some crazy stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. I think everybody has their theory as to why he got elected and whatever. I think he was just lucky because the circumstances just happened to be in his favor. I'm not going to go into full detail about that because that could be a podcast in of itself.
Absolutely.
But
and the Russians, they're good.
Well, them too.
Good ally to have for that.
But whatever the case is, nobody can deny that he's made himself present in every way imaginable. I mean, we're talking about him right now, and I'm kind of disgusted that we are, but I only bring him up to bring this point that even he is courting attention at all costs.
Absolutely.
He's doing it in, like what Rudy was just saying that bad press is good press. But my question is, in regards to that, at what point does courting all this attention through bad press turn around and bite him in the butt because of not following Law 5, not, preserving your reputation? Because eventually he's just going to get a reputation of just being a loudmouth jerk who doesn't solve problems.
100%. Yeah.
And what's that going to do for him?
Yeah. Eventually, it's gonna bite him in the butt, and his reputation is gonna be he's the guy who's just a loud. I mean, I think it's already kind of happened, but there are a lot of people who still really love him, and maybe that's because when you kind of split the difference and you have half the people hate you and half the people love you. No, when you split the difference and you have half the people hating you, the half that kind of supports you maybe goes harder for you. So maybe it's a thing where the bad press is good press thing, where it can actually help you if you have some bad press and you have some people who are adamant, like hating you, because the other side can just love you just so, just because,
Well,
just to go against that other group.
It could also be.
But that's a very unique case, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it could be a couple of things. Well, technically, I would argue he didn't really technically win the election because he didn't win the popular vote.
Yeah.
But because we have the Electoral College, he won out of a technicality.
Yeah.
Really,
if this was live, people would be calling in.
Yeah. Well, that's why this isn't live. And I'm not trying to, push my political beliefs on anybody because I don't really favor one side or the other. But I'm just making the simple point that, Hillary did win the popular vote. That is undeniable.
Yeah.
But even her has a very bad reputation for a lot of scandals. We can talk Benghazi, we can talk the emails.
100%.
And then there's a whole slew of others. So I think it was a matter of, well, both of these people have really bad reputations, so it's a lesser of two evils kind of a thing,
Yeah.
But, that doesn't explain why he won the primary, except to say that, anybody who wanted to vote against him had 5 other options, and it split the difference.
100%.
And it allowed him to basically concentrate his forces. Because I think if you add up all the people who voted for, in the Republican primary, who voted for anybody but Trump, it's way more than who voted for Trump.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
because there's so many people.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is he split the difference.
Yeah.
And I said I wasn't going to outline how I thought he got elected, but I just did.
I think
it'll be interesting to see in 2020 should the Republicans, should the Democrats get somebody who's, if not completely scandalous free, then at least relatively so.
Yeah.
And see how they go up against Donald Trump, because could it be like what I just said, that the factors just fell into place for him?
Yeah.
Or could it be that people just desperately want to believe that this outsider will solve their problems?
Yeah.
And they just become blind with hope?
Yeah.
Is it that? Or could it be also too that maybe people really did buy into his bad press strategy?
Yeah.
But now that he's continually to soil his reputation.
Yeah.
Maybe that he's basically dooming himself.
Yeah. See, the Trump example is very interesting because for a number of points. The first one being that he's a guy who, in my opinion, has sullied his reputation time and time again. So much, I mean, not even sullied his reputation is bad. I think his reputation has been like that for years. You know, I mean, even before he was president, people knew who Trump was. He was the guy who, you know what I mean? When he was younger, he was the playboy kind of millionaire guy and stuff. And then over the years, as he got older, we knew his type. We knew what he was. And it was kind of amusing when he's not the president. You know, he's a guy who says whatever's on his mind, and he does this kind of crazy TV show, you're fired, all that other stuff. But it's like we knew who he was. So it's interesting that someone with a reputation that bad in the White House and still with a lot of support. You know, there's still a lot of people who really support him, even though he kind of has a bad reputation built off of the whole, you know, no press is bad press thing, right? So it's interesting in that end. It's also interesting because I think based on what you were saying about how really the election was really kind of more of a lesser of two evils and all that other stuff, I feel like, yeah, that would be a fun exercise into laws 5 and 6 if someone on the Democratic side is relatively scandal-free against him, just to see how that works, you know what I mean? Where it's like you have someone who might have a more upstanding, kind of good, quote-unquote, reputation versus someone like him. So I think that's going to be pretty interesting. But, I mean, in general, man, for me, I think there's some cases. This book is really interesting because it's gotten a lot of criticism for laws contradicting each other and things like that. My whole thing with that is I just feel like there's no black and white out in the world. There's a lot of gray. That's all there is. Different shades of gray. And that's why at the end of every chapter, there's a reversal. So for that reason, I can say that I really don't buy into the no press is bad press thing. Nope, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't buy into it either
at all.
I do agree. And he does, or Greene does reference, you know, that as a possibility, and that, oh yeah, you could totally do that.
Yeah.
I don't buy into it, but I do buy into the part of court attention at all costs if it's, you know, something to better either yourself or humanity or whatever. Particularly if you're trying to run a business or if you're a musician. I remember one time I was in Nashville. I was driving down Broadway, you know, where all the honky tonks are. And you think, okay, well, you know, how does a country musician compete in this atmosphere? Because everybody is playing country music. You know, you can't go, hey, is there country music being played here? Well, yeah, here, there, and everywhere. You know. So how do you set yourself apart, right?
Yeah.
You know, unless you have a guy who plays the sitar or something, I don't know how. But sure enough, as I was driving down the road, some guy who is a bass player, he had attached a wireless device onto his bass guitar and ran out in the middle of the street, in the middle of traffic, and was still playing the bass and was like motioning people to go into the bar. Sure enough, people went in there because they were like, well, this has got to be interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's a good example of someone kind of...
You know, I think, yes, it's definitely... You can definitely court people's attention and sort of gather the lambs, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, but...
I think there's a fine line, though. There's a fine line, I think, on the scandal side of it.
When people find out that they're being screwed over, then they will turn against you.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, yeah...
But if people know, but like that, it's funny. Like when people find out they've been screwed over, they'll turn against you. But when people realize, oh wait a minute, that bass player just basically kind of played into our curiosity and brought us into that bar, they're not going to hate you for it. They're going to respect you. They're going to love you for it because they're like, oh my gosh, that was really smart.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So. You know.
Yeah, I think for me, this law just comes down to let your uniqueness shine, be seen, you know. And I feel like we don't even really have to work that hard. If the goal is to be seen, period, then screw all the bad press, good press thing, or good press, good. Like all you have to do really is just try to be yourself in the most unique way you can be. Where it's not something you have to put on; it's something that's natural. You could just do it yourself. Because I think that's all this law comes down to. Just be seen. Like, make yourself stand out, period, in every aspect of your life. You know what I mean? Especially if power is your thing.
Yeah.
So that's what it comes down to. So yeah, the guy doing that, going up and playing the bass or whatever, kind of letting his, I think in a way he's kind of just being his own unique self.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it comes down to. For me, I don't. Yeah, I super don't buy into the good press, bad press thing, because there's a line. I mean, there's a line across. I think we see it nowadays too. I mean, just watching the news, there's a lot of people who have a lot of scandal on them, and the scandals that they have on them have ruined them. Like, people have gotten them out of there. Like, they're not in, someone whose career was, your career was to be on TV and stuff. There are people losing work now because of different scandals. People are losing their livelihood because of scandals. I think, and I mean, some people could say that, oh, this is just how it is for a brief period of time, but long term, you can manage that. But I don't know. I don't buy that at all. I just don't think that's something useful to do.
And he goes on to also using an air of mystery to court people too.
Yeah,
especially once
part
you've
two
already.
Of this.
Yeah, like it was interesting. There was a part 2 to this whole law, and he's basically saying, well, once you've already established yourself, always leave an air of mystery. And he gives the example of this lady named Mata Hari, who was this. I'm going to do air quotes, East Asian exotic dancer, and you'll understand why I did air quotes then in just a minute, because she would, she basically brought everybody into these clubs because she would do these really exotic dances, and they were supposedly these dances told stories, that had their roots in Hindu and Javanese folklore. And also too, he says in the book that she, in terms of clothing, she revealed as much as she covered up, so to speak.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a sexual component to this.
See, this is back when that was a huge deal.
This is back when showing off your ankles was like pretty
scandalous.
I mean,
it'll be on the cover of like their version of Us Weekly or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it US Weekly or Us Weekly? I don't know.
I don't read it, so I don't know, and I don't care. But anyway, so she had garnered this reputation, and she kept changing her story though. One minute she was born and raised in India, and then spent time in Java, and then next time you'd see her, she grew up in Sumatra, and just kept changing her story.
Yeah.
And as it turned, eventually she was charged with being a German spy during World War I, because this took place in France, Paris, France, which of course she had no involvement with whatsoever.
She had no involvement, yeah.
But the thing was, she had built such a mysterious reputation that people were like,
people couldn't trust her.
Maybe she could be.
People couldn't trust her. She was mysterious, and at some point they kind of started being suspicious and fearing her a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that's how big the mystery became.
But it was at her trial that her real story came out, and the reason why I put air quotes is she was nowhere near from East Asia, and probably had never been there.
Yeah, they said she was German or something.
No,
right?
she was Dutch.
She was.
Yeah.
Margaretha Zell.
Margaretha Zell. That was her real name.
Yeah.
And when she came to France, she had half a franc in her pocket, and wasn't really, she was beautiful, but she wasn't, outstandingly beautiful, not like anybody else there.
Yeah.
Or she was just like anybody else there, rather. And she wasn't a particularly good dancer either.
Yeah.
But she just sold her story, but always kept that air of mystery. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, they because in the book, Greene talks about how she wanted to find a way to separate herself from everyone, because there was nothing about her that really distinguished herself from anyone. She wasn't necessarily smarter than everyone else. She wasn't necessarily more beautiful or could dance better than anyone. She just needed something. And what she latched on to was she started being mysterious and kind of, kind of telling people this story that she kept building up. And people bought it for a while. Like, people followed it, and the more she told that story, people were just all over it. It's more about, it's kind of how, and I was talking to John before the show, and I was kind of saying how we as humans, we like closed loops. That's kind of how our mind works. Like, you always have to close a loop. When you leave something open-ended, that's when our mind goes crazy. We try to fill that. So if you're being mysterious and you tell someone a story about where you came from, but you don't tell the full story, people are going to go crazy trying to figure it out, and they're going to build up this big thing in their head. So I think that was a big thing for Mata Hari, and that's kind of what made her as big as she was.
And just to be clear, you don't have to even work that hard to do that. I keep talking about music. There's this musician that comes to mind. His name's Justin Vernon. Most people probably know him for being a part of Bon Iver. And you've heard of Bon Iver? Yeah.
I've heard their music though.
Well, he's worked with Kanye too.
Oh, has he?
Yeah.
Kanye Titta.
Yeah, but Bon Iver is like folk basically.
Yeah.
His last album I think had like electronic elements, but anyway, that's beside the point. His first album.
No, let's get deep into this. I need to know more about Bon Iver.
Look it up. Look him up. He's really good. Really good musician. But anyway, his first album, Forever Ago, he wrote in a cabin in the middle of the woods in Wisconsin during, a really harsh winter while he was getting over some kind of intestinal disease or something insane like that. And, he wrote that he had his band in North Carolina had just broken up, and his girlfriend and him had ended their relationship and whatever, and was just in a really sore spot, and just kind of wrote this record, wrote the music rather for the record, and recorded it during that winter in that cabin, and eventually released it. And that's where the song Skinny Love, you ever heard that?
No.
Well, it took off in a big way. This record did. And, that's all he really revealed about his time in the cabin. And I watched an interview with him, and people have attached all kinds of other stories to what happened in that cabin, right? And this interviewer goes, are any of these stories true? And he's like, some of them are, and some of them aren't.
Yeah.
And the interviewer goes, well, can you dispel the ones that are? And he's like, no, I'm not going to. He's like, if people want to fantasize about that, why should I stop them?
That's
from
on
doing
them,
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to give him props. I mean, people want to attach that, this mythology around people anyway for whatever reason. So why ruin it? And if anything, it helps you out. So it's a win-win-win.
And I kind of feel like whenever people attach kind of fantastical things to what other people did and stuff, it's because the people did it consciously, I feel like this is a tactic that a lot of musicians use, a lot of filmmakers use, things like that. I mean, for me, and again, I'm totally with this. I feel it to be 100% true. Like, again, the way our minds work, we like closed loops. So when you don't tell the full truth, or you don't tell the full story or something, people's minds go crazy. I mean, that's just kind of, just go somewhere and talk to someone and start telling a story and don't finish it, and just leave. The person will go crazy trying to finish the story.
Yeah.
And you'll just come back and they'll come back to you. They'll be like, okay, so, the story ends with aliens and blah, 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 whatever. You're like, oh no, I just went to the store afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, that's, but that's, I think that's just how our mind works. So when you take it a few, when you kind of zoom out even more, it's multiplied a lot more. So, for me, there's a few examples of this, but like someone like and some people might know this, but there's a music video called "This Is America," which is essentially just a music video for a song, and all the video is a guy dressed up, no shirt, he's wearing pants, but he's just dancing around the warehouse, and a bunch of crazy stuff is happening on the background. People are looting. There's a car on fire. There's like a guy on a horse. A bunch of crazy stuff, but he's dancing. Him and some kids are just dancing, and they're the focal point of the music video. And they're just dancing, going through the warehouse, and in the background, crazy stuff's happening. But there's a lot of symbolic imagery and things like that. So the guy who made it, Childish Gambino, they asked him, what does it mean? He said, it means whatever you want it to mean. And the video went viral. There's like tons and tons of like reaction videos trying to break down all the imagery and things like that. And I mean, I think that's just an example of this part of this law, which is just that air of mystery is very, very powerful. I think it just shows that. And of course, there's movies too that people try to dissect. People are in love with Fight Club. I know Tyler Durden was the narrator the whole time, but still, I spoiled it for some people. The movie's been out for years, but but still, but again, there's filmmakers do it. Musicians do it. There's so many musicians who just don't talk a lot, who speak through their work, and who make powerful music that we think are like aliens. Like we think they're mega geniuses whose minds are somewhere somewhere out of here, but they're just normal people. They just don't close these loops for us. For a while, I thought Kanye West wasn't even human. I just thought he was a complete mega genius, and that's just all it was until he opened his mouth and just started talking a little too much. Then you're like, oh, this guy's just like me. He says dumb shit too. So, but yeah, I think there's tons of examples about having that air of mystery. You just doing little weird things. You having weird quirks like that. People are drawn to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I think, and overall, this is just part 2 of Law 6.
Yeah. It's
all part of Law 6 and courting attention. It's either courting attention through scandal or courting attention through kind of mystery and mysteriousness. I kind of feel like the linear...
Well, there's also courting attention through being just kind of outrageous in a way.
Being outrageous,
or,
yeah.
you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Being big and being ostentatious and all that. So for me, and of course there's a tie with this and Law 5. I think with me, I think it blew my mind just the way he outlined mystery and how powerful mystery is.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that's something we think about a lot. I think sometimes we react to how we see things being done, but I know there's lots of people, especially creative people, who use that tactic and who use kind of mystery to help propel, their music or their art or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of blew my mind because I think this is something that just works. It just works to affect people. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about the reversal of this. So really the only thing he talks about in the reversal of Law number 6, which is court attention at all cost, is don't use the same tactic over and over again. People are obviously gonna figure that out. So if you go out and you use kind of, if you always try to do something out there, something crazy, people are going to say, oh, this is the guy who just always does this. And again, it's reflected in your reputation also. So you become known as a person that does crazy things for attention, and then people don't really pay attention for you. I think like you were saying, when people can sense your dependency or they can sense that you want something for them, that's kind of the antithesis of power itself. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And he says how the mystery that you make should be seen as playful and a game. Another thing they said here too is try to be seen in any way possible, but whenever you're in a situation where there's someone above you, someone who's been there for a while, like back in those days, kings and queens and things like that, someone who was clearly above you, don't try to outshine them, don't try to take attention away from them, because what will end up happening is someone in that position of power that's way above you will kind of act in a way where they'll try to keep you down and they'll influence other people also. So you have to kind of be a little bit more measured about that and know when to be ostentatious and to be seen and when not to. And the example they used was Lola Montez, who was I think the rule was she became very powerful because of her associations and things like that.
I think we might have mentioned her before.
Lola Montez.
Yeah.
Might have, yeah. And this story, it was just how that time period, I think, whenever you went out to the theaters and all that, you saw plays and things like that, people had to be seated before the king and the queen. So she didn't do that. She arrived to the play later after the queen was sat. And the queen kind of isolated her, never talked to her and things like that, and kind of shunned her a little bit. So everybody else did that too. So it kind of worked the opposite way. So you kind of have to be a little bit more measured about when you should be ostentatious and be seen, I guess is the main lesson there. So what do you think there, John?
I think it's a solid law, minus the bad press is good press.
I think so too.
Apart from that, I think it's a solid law.
I think it holds. The mystery thing blew my mind. I thought it was really dope. And the reputation law, solid law too. I think that's just, principle focused living, man. Just doing the right thing day in and day out.
Yeah.
People respond to that.
Yeah. So the lesson for today is be good because people are watching.
Be good because people are watching. Oh, one quick thing is I was reading reviews about the 48 Laws, and someone actually said that without intending it, Robert Greene actually wrote a book that actually kind of it encourages humility as much as the New Testament, I think they said.
Wow.
It's without intending it. Like, he wrote this book for people who are like thirsty for power and who want to kind of get to the top. But really, a lot of the lessons in this book is be good. You know what I mean? Like, wait your turn. You know what I mean? Learn skills and you know, whatever. So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, that's what it is. I think overall, be good. Do the right thing consistently. And if you do, and I guess the real tactic comes in Law 6, which is try to be seen, try to be a little more mysterious. Don't always tell people what your plans are. Maybe tell them in another way, or maybe just hide your plans completely and tell them something else. But be mysterious about it.
Don't be that person on Facebook that tells their whole life story every time you go on it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, don't be
it's
that.
It's infuriating.
Don't be that person. Don't be going on there like, I'm so depressed because I don't have a girlfriend. Don't be that guy. Don't do that.
Also, don't be that guy. Sometimes you have to go to the hospital, and I get it. Sometimes bad stuff happens, and you want people to know. But don't be that guy who goes to the hospital and then takes a picture of your hand with a little bracelet, and then people leave comments like, "What's going on?" and then you just don't say anything. You know what I mean? Don't be that guy.
Yeah, that's not the era mystery that we want you to.
Yeah,
don't do that. Yeah. So,
but
anyway,
it's all good. For the 48 Laws podcast, I'm Rudy Mulwamba.
I'm John Carp,
and we're signing off. Well, that was our take. What do you think? Email us at the 48 Laws of Power podcast at gmail.com.
Be sure to check us out on iTunes and YouTube for a new episode every Monday.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.